The moment the lid came off the jar, 3 alien dignitaries recoiled like someone had just opened a vat of acid. "By the moons of Veltrax, what is that?" hissed Ambassador Threx, his eye clusters twitching as a thin trail of red vapor drifted toward him. Flint Everhart, standing in the middle of the ornate diplomatic dining hall aboard the Corellian flagship, grinned as he poured a generous dollop of the sauce onto his rations. "This," he said, stirring it into his meal like he was mixing sugar into tea. "This is mild back home." Threx backed up another step, his ceremonial robe catching on the edge of the table. "It's glowing." "Capsaicin does that under certain lights," Flint said, completely unfazed. "You should see ghost pepper extract. Now that stuff'll make your soul file a noise complaint." Envoy Grell, the youngest of the 3, leaned forward, nostrils fluttering. "He cannot possibly ingest that. It registers as chemical weaponry on our scanners." Flint took a bite, chewed, then gave a small appreciative nod. "Could use more kick." Ambassador Threx swayed visibly. "That is not natural." "It's a free-range chili," Flint offered, mouthful. "Grown in the Mojave." The Corellian delegation stared at him in silent horror as he casually took another spoonful. A server droid paused mid-stride and changed direction. The ship's AI dimmed the lights slightly as if shielding itself from what it was witnessing. "Human," Threx finally said, voice low and rigid, "this behavior. It is concerning." Flint wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Where I'm from, we have contests to see who can eat the hottest stuff without passing out. Winners get a t-shirt." Threx turned to the translator drone. "Is he lying or hallucinating?" The drone beeped. "Neither." That evening, the Galactic Unity Council convened an emergency debrief. Flint wasn't invited. Instead, he was escorted to his quarters by 2 Corellian guards and advised to rest until further instructions, which, in diplomatic terms, meant please don't do anything else terrifying. He slept fine. The next morning, the ship's medical officer, a crusty old Narnaxian named Vulek, requested a full physiological scan of Flint for scientific purposes. Flint agreed, mostly because he wanted to see if anyone else had a reaction to his backup bottle of Carolina Reaper sauce. "Hold still," Vulek said, waving the scanner over his chest. "You're running a low-grade fever." "That's just my metabolism," Flint replied. "I had a run this morning." "You did what?" Vulek narrowed his eyes. "A run? Where?" "This is a diplomatic cruiser. I jogged the docking ring." 3 laps. "You are aware that deck gravity fluctuates in that section?" "Yep." Vulek blinked slowly and returned to his scan. Within 2 days, word had spread across the fleet. The human who consumed weapon-grade thermals was now a subject of fascination. Some thought he was a mutant. Others believed he was part machine. One faction of the Zatek contingent insisted he was a prophet. Flint just wanted more hot sauce. He was in the mess deck when the first challenge came. A Zentari chef named Polak approached him with a bowl of green paste that smelled like burnt electronics and despair. "Try this," Polak said, placing the bowl in front of him. "It is not from your Earth. It is our native searing root paste. No offworlder has survived a full teaspoon." Flint raised an eyebrow. "You said survived. Is that literal?" "Yes." He looked at it. "Smells like regret." "It is." Flint dipped his spoon in and took a modest bite. The room watched silently. He chewed, swallowed, blinked. His eyes watered just a little. "Okay." He coughed. "That one's got legs." Polak's jaw slackened. "You live." "Barely," Flint rasped, reaching for water. "Not trying that again." Polak clapped his hands in reverence, then walked off muttering something about culinary legends. By the end of the week, Flint had unwittingly become the centerpiece of a cultural exchange program he hadn't signed up for. Dishes arrived from across the quadrant, some steaming, some pulsing with heat signatures, each more dangerous than the last. He tried them all carefully and kept notes. Then, during a diplomatic reception, things went sideways. Flint was seated next to Threx again, who still kept a cautious distance. The dinner was formal, quiet, and peaceful until an aide accidentally swapped Flint's water with a small container of ferrolaxian coolant. The moment he sipped it, Flint doubled over with a low grunt. The coolant was inert to most species. To humans, it was toxic. Threx sprang from his seat. "Medic!" Flint's chest burned as if he'd swallowed dry ice. He couldn't speak. His limbs went cold. The room exploded into chaos. Vulek arrived within minutes, slamming an injector into Flint's thigh and barking orders. "He needs immediate evac to the medbay. Clear the corridor." Flint faded out before he reached the door. He woke up 2 days later, throat sore, chest bandaged, and a dull ache rolling through his stomach. Vulex stood nearby, arms folded. "You're lucky," the Narnaxian said. "The coolant bonded with residual capsaicin in your gut. Created a temporary polymer. Your organs didn't shut down because your stomach lining was still inflamed." Flint blinked. "So, chili saved me? In a way." He groaned. "Now that's a t-shirt. You will remain under observation for 72 hours. No solid food. No spice. No exceptions." 3 days on nutrient broth was enough to break any man. Flint followed orders, though, and when he was finally cleared for light solids, he didn't even ask for hot sauce. But the buzz around the fleet hadn't faded. If anything, it had intensified. The Galactic Unity Council sent observers. Medical journals requested interviews. A culinary institute from the Vornex cluster offered him an honorary degree. He declined everything. The next shift in tone came subtly. During a joint training drill, one of the Corellian cadets approached Flint during a break. "You're the one who ate the fire sauce," the cadet said. Flint nodded cautiously. "We thought you were unstable. Now we think you're prepared." "For what?" The cadet hesitated. "For things we haven't imagined yet." Later that evening, Threx visited him in his quarters. "You have caused considerable disruption," the ambassador said. "Sorry," Flint replied. "Didn't mean to." Threx studied him. "And yet you've also bridged gaps none of our previous efforts could." Flint leaned against the wall. "With hot sauce?" "With resilience," Threx corrected. "The willingness to suffer for experience. That is a trait not many possess." Flint didn't respond right away. Eventually he said, "I just like flavor. The rest came after." Threx nodded. "We are dispatching a cultural envoy to Earth. We want to understand more. About food, but also about pain. And how you humans dance with it." Flint winced. "You might want to start with barbecue joints in Texas. Just don't try the wings challenge without a medic nearby." Threx departed with a thoughtful expression. Flint sat down, finally alone, and looked at the unopened bottle of Reaper sauce on his nightstand. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand, and smiled faintly. Then he put it back in the drawer. He wasn't ready for another round. Not just yet. The first thing Flint noticed when he stepped back onto Earth soil was how incredibly quiet it felt. No hum of artificial gravity regulators, no multilingual announcements echoing through alloy corridors, just the wind teasing loose gravel in the Mojave and the rhythmic creak of heat expanding metal. The shuttle had landed just shy of dusk, kicking up a whirl of dust that settled slowly. A technician in a khaki jumpsuit waved him toward a squat building with a faded sign reading, "Experimental Human Adaptability Research Annex Outpost 6. The name had always felt more like a threat than a title. Inside, the walls were still lined with filter vents and reinforced bulkheads, a relic from the outpost's days as a radiation testing site. A woman in her 40s stood by a table cluttered with sealed containers and diagnostic tablets. She didn't bother looking up. "Strip down to your base layer and sit on the scanner bed," she said. Flint peeled off his jacket and laid it over a chair. "Nice to see you too, Dr. Keene." "You were supposed to check in 12 hours ago," she replied, tapping her screen. "Instead, I get a report from the Galactic Unity Council that you nearly flatlined due to coolant ingestion." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "It was an accident. Everything with you is." She turned the scanner on. "Any recurring symptoms?" "Pressure in the chest, numbness in the extremities, memory fog." "Just dreams," he said. "Weird ones. Like I'm stuck in a loop. Same corridor, same door, but I can't open it." She frowned. "Were you experiencing any auditory distortion during the dreams?" "Sort of. There's a high whine, like tinnitus, but sharper. Could be neural feedback from the polymer breakdown." She hit a button. The scanner pulsed faintly beneath his skin. "You're still metabolizing trace elements through your lymphatic system. That's going to cause interference with your REM cycles. Should I be worried? Let me finish scanning before you decide to panic," she said, and walked over to a monitor. Flint lay back and stared at the ceiling, which had a hairline crack running from one corner to the air vent. A gray moth fluttered in the opposite corner, tapping against the diffused light like it had somewhere to be. Keene returned 5 minutes later, holding a tablet. "Your cortisol levels are elevated, but nothing critical. I'm more concerned about what the exposure did to your microbiome." "My gut's fine." "It isn't. You've got 3 new bacterial colonies that don't match any Earth-based taxonomy. One of them's producing a protein that mimics dopamine uptake inhibitors. He sat up. Is that bad? It means you're chemically rewarding yourself for surviving near-death experiences. Your body's building a feedback loop around danger. Neat. Not neat. Reckless. You're developing a physiological addiction to extreme stress. He stood, pulling his jacket back on. So what now? You stay here for a week. We monitor your vitals. If nothing mutates or bursts out of your chest, maybe we'll let you leave. Flint paused. Dr. Keene, did you just make a bursting chest joke? She finally looked up and rolled her eyes. Go to dorm bay 3 before I change my mind. By the 3rd day, he had memorized the vending machine's inventory, reassembled the outpost's ancient coffee percolator, and rigged a signal booster from scrap wiring just so he could stream old martial arts films. The isolation didn't bother him. It was the stillness. No diplomatic missions. No alien chefs challenging his gastrointestinal fortitude. Just the hollow echo of his own boots across linoleum. At 6 the next morning, a soft chime woke him. A message blinked on his wall display. External visitors awaiting clearance. He blinked the sleep out of his eyes and pulled on a shirt. When he stepped into the main corridor, Keene was already at the security terminal, glaring at the screen. Who are they? He asked. Zaphari delegation, she muttered. They didn't request landing approval. Just dropped in orbit and pinged us. A moment later, the outer airlock cycled, and a tall, slender figure stepped into the room, exosuit hissing softly as it depressurized. The Zaphari diplomat had skin like burnished copper and eyes that refracted light into shifting prisms. She carried nothing but a small metallic case. You are Flint Everhart, she said without preamble. Depending on who's asking. I am Envoy Lethari. I bring a proposition. Keene folded her arms. He's under medical observation. If this is about more spicy food. It is not, said Lethari. We request his assistance with a containment anomaly aboard one of our research vessels. Flint raised an eyebrow. You need a human for a containment breach? The anomaly mimics psychological distress. It destabilizes the mental states of those who attempt to analyze it. No Zaphari has lasted more than 26 minutes in its presence. And you think I'm qualified because you survived neurochemical trauma that would have rendered most species catatonic. We believe your adaptive resilience may allow you to interface with the anomaly without succumbing. Keene stepped forward. And if it doesn't? Then he goes catatonic. Flint held up a hand. If I go with you and something goes wrong, I want full medical rights for Dr. Keene to handle my care. No Zaphari protocols, no interspecies jurisdiction. She calls the shots. Lethari nodded once. Agreed. The Zaphari research vessel was quieter than Flint expected. No crew buzz, no ambient chatter, just the hush of a ship holding its breath. Lethari led him down a corridor bathed in blue light, her steps barely audible. They stopped outside a sealed chamber marked only by a glowing glyph in the shape of a broken circle. This is the observation node, she said. The anomaly is contained within. What should I expect? Nothing. That's the danger. She handed him a small transmitter the size of a contact lens. Place this inside your ear. It will stream real-time telemetry back to your physician. The door hissed open. Inside, the chamber looked like the inside of a cathedral, vaulted walls, smooth curves, and a single pedestal in the center, atop which floated a soft white sphere. It pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. The moment he stepped in, the temperature dropped. Not physically, but perceptually. His skin didn't register cold, but his mind did. He moved closer. The sphere flickered. A whisper, just below the edge of hearing, slid into his awareness. Not words, shapes of ideas. Unfinished regrets. He blinked and suddenly he was back in the Mojave, 12 years ago, watching his brother walk away after their last argument. The sand in his boots, the ache in his throat, the words he never said. He reached up and touched the sphere. The memory shattered. Now he was floating in space. No tether, watching Earth shrink behind him. He wasn't breathing, couldn't breathe. Something pressed on his chest. He gritted his teeth. Not real. Not real. The sphere pulsed again, slower now. He saw himself reflected in its surface. Pale, tired, eyes bloodshot. Then it stopped glowing. He collapsed to his knees, drenched in sweat. The door behind him hissed open, and Hari stepped in cautiously. 17 minutes, she said. You disrupted its projection field. He coughed. It tried to use guilt as a weapon. Personal memories. Felt real enough. We believe it feeds on unresolved psychological constructs, she said. You overwhelmed it. Or it got bored of me. He stood, swaying. Either way, you owe me a drink. She tilted her head. Is that a reward ritual? Only if it comes with peanuts. Back on Earth, Keen ran a full neurochemical panel. His dopamine levels were stable. Cortisol had dropped. No signs of psychic contamination. You're clean, she said, handing him a bottle of electrolyte solution. But your brain's been rewired in a dozen minor ways. Your hippocampus is more active now than it's ever been. Am I smarter? No, she said. Just more haunted. He chuckled weakly. Great. 2 days later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside was a small glass orb and a note. We analyzed the anomaly's final state. It left something behind. He turned the orb over in his palm. It was warm. When he held it up to the light, it shimmered gently, and for a split second he swore he saw a corridor. A door. And this time it opened. At precisely 6:30 in the morning, a hawk circled above Outpost 6, casting its shadow across the cracked concrete as Flint Everhart sat cross-legged on the roof, holding the orb in one hand and a lukewarm mug of instant coffee in the other. The orb had been inert since the day it arrived, but he kept it close anyway, like a souvenir from a fever dream he hadn't fully unpacked. Behind him, the steel access door creaked open. Dr. Keen's boots clanged against the metal grating. You're not supposed to be up here, she said, shielding her eyes from the rising sun. There's no sign posted, he replied without turning. There's a retinal scanner that locks the hatch. I bypassed it. She crossed her arms. You're not cleared for that. I left a sticky note on your terminal. Said I'd be up here. That counts as a requisition. She exhaled, glanced at the orb, then sat down beside him, knees stiff. You're not sleeping. No, he said. Not since I touched it. Any hallucinations? He shook his head. Nothing visual. Just echoes. Like I'm remembering things from someone else's life. That's not how memory works. Maybe not for you. He set the orb down beside the mug and leaned back on his hands. The desert stretched out in every direction, unbothered by their presence. They sat in silence until the wind picked up, brushing sand across the roof. Do you know what this place used to be? Keen asked. I assumed something classified. Not really. It was a psychological endurance chamber. They'd lock people inside for days with no stimuli. Just white walls and a bed. Volunteers. Drafted conscripts. Cold War relic. The idea was to measure how long someone could last before breaking. He glanced over. And? Average time was 27 hours. He looked at the orb again. This thing beat that in 17 minutes. She stood up and brushed off her coat. We're done monitoring. The council closed the file this morning. You're officially released from observation. That's it? You're healthy. No anomalies. No alien residue. You're free to go. He remained seated. What if it's not done with me? She paused at the hatch. Then you'll have to give it a reason to stay. The door slammed shut behind her. Later that afternoon, he packed his few belongings into a duffel and signed the outpost's discharge papers. The orb he left on the roof, half buried in a nest of coiled wire and sun-bleached cable. He didn't say goodbye to Keen. She'd made her position clear, whatever came next wasn't medical. By nightfall, he was halfway to Albuquerque in a rented ground cruiser, windows down, engine humming. The open road felt like a relic, simple, unambiguous. No puzzles. No diplomacy. He stopped at a diner just off the highway, where the jukebox only played country from the early 60s and the waitress called everyone Han regardless of mood or gender. You look like you've seen some things, she said, dropping a bowl of chili in front of him. I've eaten worse, he replied, poking it with his spoon. 2 tables over, a man in a denim jacket glanced up from his newspaper. You Flint Everhart? Flint sighed. Depends on who's asking. The man stood, walked over, and sat down without invitation. He slid a small silver rectangle across the table. This badge still mean anything to you? Flint picked it up. A faded emblem. A stylized eagle clutching a wrench and a crumpled coffee cup. Federal Resilience Task Division, he said. Didn't think they were still around. We're not. Not officially. Most of our funding dried up after the Martian quarantine lifted. So what do you want with me? The man nodded toward the window. We picked up a signal. Same frequency as the orb. It's bouncing between old NORAD satellites and a decommissioned lunar relay. Flint leaned back. I left that thing behind. Maybe, the man said. But it didn't leave you. The waitress appeared with a fresh pot of coffee. More. No, thanks, Flint said, standing up. I'm done with strange signals. The man stood too. We're not here to recruit you. Just letting you know whatever it was, it's dormant. But if it wakes up again, we'll call you. Flint dropped a 10 on the table and headed for the door without looking back. By the time he reached the motel on the outskirts of Gallup, the sky had turned a bruised purple. He checked in using an alias, declined housekeeping, and locked the door behind him. He didn't turn the light on. Instead, he walked to the sink, splashed cold water on his face, and stared at his reflection. His eyes looked older. Not tired, just aware of too much. He sat on the bed and pulled out a weathered notebook. Inside were sketches. Not of the orb, but of the room it had shown him. The corridor. The door. He flipped to the last page. One word in the center. Open. He stared at it for a long time. Then he tore it out, crumpled it, and dropped it in the wastebasket. The next morning, he drove west. No destination. No mission. Just the road, the wind, and the quiet hum of a body still learning what it meant to survive. He never saw the orb again. And nothing followed.